protect the youth from malign influence. Encouraging them to think for themselves was fraught with danger. Yet Socrates sought them out, close to the most public place in the city, the Agora.
Across the ancient world, commerce was increasingly a driver for change, and that was felt particularly keenly here in Athens. The Agora was a buzzing market, a place where people came to exchange goods and gossip.
Socrates loved sharing his ideas here. It's from agora we get the word agoraphobia, a fear of open spaces. There was anxiety back then too, as under-18s were barred. Now archaeology helps point to how Socrates met young Athenians just outside the agora's boundary in a private dwelling.
So we're right on the edge of the agora space, and we're in between the public space and the private space behind us here. And this wall behind us right here is one of those private establishments. And we have a later source that mentions Socrates visiting the house of a friend of his, and we have this figure, Simon the cobbler, and he's hosting young men. So we have the literary source, but what's nice is that during the excavations right here, they found hobnails, they found bone eyelets, and then they also found a cup. And this is the amazing bit of evidence, really, because this cup has the name Simon scratched on it. And this is a replica right here of the cup, and you can see that it does have Simonos scratched on it.
It's so thrilling being here, imagining those big new ideas could possibly be enacted there 2,500 years ago.
Absolutely. We can say that Socrates was walking around this space, and he was probably hanging out right here in order to discuss things that might otherwise be something that might get him in trouble.
I mean, it's a dangerous situation, that, potentially. So you've got this magnetic personality having these rumbustious conversations with young men and encouraging them to think for themselves.
That's exactly right. This is the place where we're supposed to have freedom of thought and freedom of expression and so on in this democratic idea. But this is a place where you have to respect the gods, and you have to respect your elders, and you have to respect the laws of the city. He's questioning the gods, he's questioning the laws, so he's really putting it to the test and forcing these young guys to see things in a different way, and the city didn't really like that.
Socrates was storing up trouble, especially as some of his devotees were confident young aristocrats, the city's future leaders. Most notable was Alcibiades. Well-born, wealthy and an Olympic champion, this sexually promiscuous hellraiser entranced and scandalised Athens for decades. Yet this playboy was friends with Socrates, who was 20 years his senior. Socrates had actually saved Alcibiades' life during the Battle of Potidaea.
Plato's Symposium describes an infamous exchange that took place between them during a heady, aristocratic drinking party.
A drunken Alcibiades, we're told, crashes the discussion, which turns to the question of beauty. In Greek culture, Alcibiades' body beautiful would typically have been regarded as a sign of his moral beauty too. But it appears Alcibiades bought into Socrates' alternative concept of real beauty.
Socrates, he says, might be ugly on the outside, but he has an inner beauty that by far outshines any physical beauty, and that he, Alcibiades, loves Socrates because he is the wisest man and therefore the most beautiful.
However, when it came to achieving inner beauty for himself, Alcibiades was woefully out of step. He thought his good looks could help him, but his cocky plan to seduce Socrates was rebuffed.
You're plotting to get real beauty in exchange for its appearance, Socrates said. That would be gold for bronze.
For Socrates, the talents of young aristocrats were worthless without the wisdom to use them properly. By debating with them, he was pushing the patience of Athens. Yet Socrates didn't compromise his principles, as demonstrated in the story of the Oracle of Delphi.
We're told that a friend of Socrates called Chaerephon, a rather impetuous individual from all accounts, came on pilgrimage here to this sacred site.
Delphi had been a place of religious devotion for 2,000 years. Chaerephon, in time-honoured fashion, climbed the sacred way to ask a question of the god Apollo, who spoke through a priestess.
When he finally reached the oracle, he asked, "Is there any man wiser than Socrates?" And the answer came back, no.
Chaerephon took the message to Socrates, who in typical manner questioned the oracle's words.
Even the words of Apollo, a god, for heaven's sake, was subject to Socrates' scrutiny. He set about cross-examining people who had a reputation for wisdom or a particular kind of specialist knowledge.
After questioning public officials, poets and craftsmen, he discovered that they all lacked the wisdom they claimed.
Eventually, Socrates concluded that the oracle was indeed right. He was the wisest of men, but only because, as he put it, I don't pretend to know what I don't know.
Socrates was wiser because he acknowledged the limits of his own understanding. By publicly exposing the false pretensions and ignorance of those who did claim to know the truth, he was bound to make enemies.
But there was something else about Socrates that was even more unsettling. He claimed to have his own daimonion, or guiding spirit, a kind of hotline of communication to the supernatural world.
This daimonion spoke to him during trance-like episodes. It warned him from making wrong decisions. On one occasion, it advised against entering public politics.
Socrates' followers would have been in awe of this uniquely personal divine calling, but the average Athenian would have been confused and deeply disturbed by it. Don't forget, this is a time and place where ritual, devotion and belief all take place out in public as part of a shared experience.
Not only that, but Greek folk culture imagined the world to be infused with spirits, not all of them good.
Socrates' unorthodox private spirituality could easily be confused with a darker, more troubling kind of magic. Some muttered that he was a sorcerer.
In this super-religious culture, the philosopher was laying himself open to scandal. False rumours and innuendo would culminate on a very public stage, fostering the kind of misinformation that would ultimately spell disaster for Socrates.
Picture Socrates bustling up here to the Theatre of Dionysus in spring 423 BC, buying some snacks to munch during the show, chickpeas, figs, nuts, settling down to watch the drama.
He's here to watch a new comedy called Clouds by the young buck of Athenian theatre, Aristophanes, only 22 and eager to make his mark.
By now a big character in the city, Socrates is considered fair game, and he's parodied pretty mercilessly. He's portrayed as a ludicrous figure, the head of a ridiculous school called the Think Shop.
What's that? Up in the air, in a basket.
That's Socrates.
Oh, Socrates, Socrates, could you please tell me what you're doing up there?
Walking on air, circumcogitating the sun.
Socrates' character was merged with other intellectuals who were arousing popular suspicion. The devious sophists, who undermined society by making the weak argument defeat the stronger, and the pre-Socratics, who in some cases displaced the preeminence of the gods with their science.
We're told that Socrates actually came to the theatre to watch Aristophanes' Clouds. What could it have felt like to see himself portrayed in that way?
I think he must have been amused. There's this anecdote of Socrates actually standing up in the seats of the theatre so that those who didn't know him knew who he was and what he looked like as his character was being ridiculed on stage. So I think Socrates was detached from all these standard norms of society, and I think it's possible that he might have enjoyed that.
Yeah. On the face of it, this is all very amusing, but do you think that Socrates should be worried by the way that Aristophanes is choosing to portray him?
In hindsight, I think he should have been worried. The core of democracy, the principle of democracy is that the citizens be educated. If you don't have educated citizens, democracy does not work. The theater was a major tool for educating the Athenian citizens, and the memory of that portrayal would have remained for decades to come, as a whole generation of Athenians would have been exposed to it.
It's the ancient equivalent of trial by media.
It is, in 5th century Athens, yeah.
She's going to strike me again.
Of course. Using the unjust logic, I'm convinced I can prove the necessity for it.
If you do, you can take yourself off to the bottomless pit. You and your newfangled logic, and Socrates too.
But the cracks appearing in Socrates' reputation were nothing compared to what was happening to Athens itself. As the war with Sparta dragged on, people questioned the success of the democratic experiment.
At the heart of the uncertainty was Socrates' close friend Alcibiades. He'd been chosen to lead an expedition against Sicily in 415 BC, the largest in Athens' military history.
But one night, before they set sail, someone stalked through Athens' streets, mutilating statues of the protector god Hermes. The rumour spread that Alcibiades and his aristocratic friends were the vandals, part of a plot to bring down democracy.
Back in Athens, rumour escalated to outrage, and Alcibiades was ordered home to face trial on charges of sacrilege. But then, en route, he vanished, and where he reappeared shocked everyone. He turned up a traitor in the bosom of Athens' greatest enemy, Sparta.
Alcibiades' damaging defection exacerbated the anxieties of a God-fearing public. They needed a scapegoat, and Socrates was tainted by association. But he seems unconcerned, doggedly pursuing the knowledge of right from wrong above all else. So when the philosopher unexpectedly entered public life in his 60s, he was on a collision course with Athens.
He became presiding officer in an emotionally charged case whose drama was played out here on the hill of the Pnyx. 6 disgraced Athenian generals were accused of failing to collect the bodies of dead soldiers lost at sea.
The public called for the generals to be tried together, in breach of Athenian law. But Socrates refused to be swept along by the vengeful mood of the crowd.
Even though threatened with indictment for treason, Socrates refused to budge. He wanted no part in this kangaroo court. As the sun set, there was stalemate, and then the next morning, Socrates was off the case. Later that day, The generals were all tried here together at the Pnyx, condemned and then executed.